Today we have a very special installment, a deep dive into a relationship, an alliance, if you will, that a lot of people aren't quite keeping on their radar, and maybe they should. Stick with us for the next hour, and hopefully you'll be illuminated. If not, just go watch a cat playing with a string or a cat hitting a cobra. The Middle East is full of recognizable, often interesting countries. But the most, I guess, nefarious, may be the right word here, the most nefarious one might not be the nation that first comes to your mind. So let's go through them. There's Egypt, for example, which we undoubtedly all learned about incessantly in grade school.
Let my people go!
The slaves are mine. Their lives are mine. All that they own is mine.
Sorry, fun clip. Here's the real one.
Egypt, birthplace of one of the oldest, most powerful, and longest-lasting civilizations on Earth.
Also, did you know that Cleopatra was an opium whore? Comment below. You have Afghanistan and Iraq, which have become kind of synonymous with failed neoconservative policies.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations and to attack the military capability of the Taliban regime.
Saddam, as we said, dressed in this raincoat, black suit, with his feet and hands tied, being taken from the execution room to the gallows.
Then, of course, there's Iran. And we're lucky to go a week without them threatening the destruction of the United States.
کسی خباثت کنه و شروع کنه بدانه که سیلی‌های سختی خواهد خورد.
Get a new thing. How about that? Then there are your super rich oil states like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, a personal favorite of Garfield.
Normal, where are you taking me? You're not going to mail me to Abu Dhabi again, are you?
And then there is Qatar. I'm not going to say Qatar. I know some of you want me to. Qatar. Nestled right there on the Persian Gulf, Qatar is home to a population of only around 3 million people. It is, however, an extremely well-off people, coming in at the third highest GDP per capita in terms of purchasing power. Turns out it helps if you use slaves. There are actually only around a couple 100,000 or so actual Qataris living there. So under the radar, Qatar would no doubt be even less known if they hadn't secured the bid to host the 2022 World Cup, which went off without a hitch.
What we have categorically proven is that bin Hammam paid bribes and operated slush funds to pay people who had an influence on the vote. Now, he was in effect buying the vote for Qatar. He was arguing that, he was paying those bribes so that Qatar could win. Therefore, Qatar has won its vote through foul means. Now, he was not on the official bid committee. That does not mean that the vote process wasn't wholly tainted by corruption. We have proven that a whole slew of officials, African officials, South Pacific officials, officials from the Caribbean, were corruptly involved in this bid. through bin Hammam and a very senior Qatari figure. And therefore, the whole thing has to be rerun. There's no doubt about it.
And in another clearly above board achievement, this month Qatar was appointed to the UN Women's Rights Commission. Should note, likely not participating any of the women of Qatar. Sorry, did I say likely? I meant definitely. Definitely not participating. Okay, fine. A corrupt, rich Middle Eastern nation that hates women. What else is new? Who cares? I'd agree with you if I didn't understand the crazy outsized influence that Qatar has on American life. Now, the United States, our relationship with the Middle East has always been a little quirky, but the United States relationship with Qatar is flat out nuts. For starters, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar serves as the forward headquarters for U.S. Central Command, the command in charge of U.S. military operations in the Middle East.
Qatar and Al Udeid, the base here, you know, if you were thinking about the air campaign that we're doing right now, Al Udeid would be that center hub, and then everything really branches out from there.
Now, the U.S. moved operations from Saudi Arabia to Qatar in 2003 after U.S. troop presence in the kingdom became kind of a friction point for relations between the United States and Saudi Arabia. Beyond the military ties, the U.S. is actually the largest source of foreign direct investment into Qatar, as well as its largest source of imports. Now, Qatar itself has invested tens of billions across the United States economy. And President Trump has even praised Qatar for its role as a mediator in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Qatar is absolutely trying to help. I know them well. I know them very well. And they're doing everything they can. Very tough situation, but they're absolutely trying to help. Ostensibly, this would seem to make Qatar an ally, and a good one at that. Until you do a little digging. If you do a lot of digging, you'll pretty quickly find that a lot of the influence is bought and paid for. Universities. Let's start with that. In a stat that is so mind-blowing, I have to go back to it every couple of weeks or so just to make sure that I didn't dream it. Qatar donates more money to U.S. universities than any other country in the world by far. From 2014 to 2019, Qatar gave $2.7 billion to our universities. And that figure is actually double what third place gave. Anyone guess third place? Anyone want to try and guess third place? China. More than double China. Some schools that receive Qatari money include Cornell University, Virginia Commonwealth University, Carnegie Mellon University, Northwestern, Texas A&M. Matter of fact, February 2024, A&M's Board of Regents voted to close their Qatar campus by 2028. There's also Georgetown University. Speaking of which, Georgetown, they actually have their own campus in Qatar.
Hi, I'm Claudio Pergolisi. I'm a sophomore at Georgetown University in Qatar, and today I'll be giving you a tour of the Mill Housing dorms. The housing is a very secure facility, which requires you to have an identification card, which gives you access to the gate.
As we've pointed out on the show before, research shows a direct correlation between the presence of Qatari funding and the Students for Justice Palestine, who you may know as the group that ravaged American campuses last year. Although Qatari Ambassador Masal Hamad Al-Thani denied Qatar influencing American universities, stating, "Qatar does not influence these universities, and we have nothing to do with anything that happens on their home campuses in the United States." I'm not buying it. But let's just assume that's true. You can understand the suspicion folks may have, considering that Qatar was actively housing Hamas as they planned and executed the October 7th attacks, right?
Somewhere, amid the pristine streets and all the skyscrapers, Doha has an open secret. Qatar's capital city, 1,800 kilometers away from Gaza, a comfortable home for the leadership of Hamas.
Hamas also opened a political office in Qatar in 2012.
Over the years, many have criticized Qatar for hosting any Hamas leadership, but during this war on Gaza, it's been labeled as a controversial benefit to house Hamas's political leadership.
So Qatar's intentions are suspect. They've used terrorists to keep bigger Arabs in check, bigger Arab states in check.
Hundreds came from across Qatar and elsewhere in the region to pay their respects to Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas.
Some people argue over Qatar or Qatar. That guy just said Qatar and Hamas. Did you catch that? Anyway, let's move on to think tanks. Take, for example, the Brookings Institute, which sort of presents itself as a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. Our mission is to conduct in-depth, nonpartisan research to improve policy and governance at local, national, and global levels. Actually, a 2019 documentary by Mike Cernovich pretty clearly laid out the subversive relationship between Qatar and Brookings.
Well, the Brookings Institution, one of the largest, oldest, most established think tanks in Washington, has accepted at least $24 million from Qatar.
Brookings is massive, literally untold millions from foreign sources. Untold because they have a U.S. branch, which is subject to American finance and donation laws, and then they have a Doha branch in Qatar, which is subject to zero. So we have absolutely no transparency into how much is pouring into that branch. WikiLeaks released kind of an amazing little cable, and the cable quoted a Qatari official claiming that Brookings is worth as much as an aircraft carrier to us, which is kind of a tremendous thing. And at Brookings, we know the money changes their positions on things because we've heard from former fellows there that they say, hey, the one thing you can't do is knock the Qatari government.
Keep in mind that was on top of a 2014 report from the New York Times. All references available, link in the descriptions as every installment. The New York Times detailed a 4-year, $14.8 million donation to help fund the Brookings Doha affiliate. Here is an excerpt from that report. If a member of Congress is using the Brookings reports, they should be aware they are not getting the full story, said Salim Ali, who served as a visiting fellow at the Brookings Doha Center in Qatar and who said he had been told during his job interview that he could not take positions critical of the Qatari government in papers. They may not be getting a false story, but they are not getting the full story. Brookings Institute president, retired General John Allen, faced accusations that he illegally lobbied on behalf of Qatar. He resigned from his position in 2022, and the probe was dropped subsequently in 2023. Let's go on to the media while we're talking about the finances here. The biggest mouthpiece for Qatar and its agenda is, without a doubt, Al Jazeera.
Are you going to meet these demands?
Our sovereignty is a red line. We don't accept anybody interfering our sovereignty. When you tell me to close a channel like Al Jazeera, history will write one day, in 50 or 60, 70 years, how it changed the whole idea of free speech in the region.
You see, while Saudi Arabia had been dropping its support for certain political Islamist groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, Qatar didn't follow suit. And Al Jazeera gave the voices of political Islam and others a platform.
Are you coming to Qatar for the World Cup? If so, here are 5 things you can do while here. A great way to explore Qatar's desert is dune bashing. The Museum of Islamic Art, which showcases 14 centuries of Islamic art and artifacts from around the world. If you want to experience Qatari culture, Souk Waqif is the place to go. And if you're lucky, you might even spot a flamingo.
If you're lucky. If you're really lucky and you're in Qatar, you're not a slave. Now, Al Jazeera claims to be a private enterprise. Not even close. It's undeniable that Al Jazeera is funded and financed by the Emir of Qatar. And as has already been pointed out, not exactly well known for any type of criticism of the Qatari government. Like at all. Pretty much ever. It's also the home to this absolutely not a terrorist sympathizer, Mehdi Hassan.
I myself have problems with the war as it's being waged, but genocide it definitely isn't. The aim here is not to kill as many Palestinians.
That's not the definition of genocide.
It's one of the
you wrote a book on genocide. That's not the definition of genocide.
It's one of the definitions.
It's not.
Try and kill.
It's not based on numbers, the definition
It's
of
also
genocide.
based on intent and on numbers.
It's based on the intent
Yes,
to destroy, to kill in whole or in part.
There's no intent here.
That's
as far as I know, look,
intent.
I'm not.
I just want to
I'm not a government spokesman. You seem to be presenting me as a government spokesman.
How did I present you in a government spokesman? I asked you for your view on the war.
Also, remember how we pointed out that Qatar essentially housed Hamas, including throughout the time it planned the October 7th attacks? Well, the Qatari Prime Minister managed to go on a press tour to place the blame squarely where it belongs, the United States.
You have a Hamas office here, and Hamas has been designated, I think, repeatedly by the U.S. government, certainly by the Congress, as a terror organization. And people say, well, how could you have a Hamas office here? What is that?
We have to go back to the root of this office, like why it's here in the first place. And Hamas office, when it was opened here in the first place, it was opened with full transparency and full consultation and actually even request from the U.S.
The U.S. asked you to put a Hamas office here?
They have asked us to open the channels with them and to have an established communication channel with the same case what was applied to Taliban as well. At the end of the day, if you have a presence of someone in your country and you are engaging and talking, it doesn't mean that you are endorsing his ideas. It doesn't mean that you are supporting him. The purpose of this office was to facilitate peace, to stabilize the region, and to make sure that always it's serving the purpose.
Now let's move on to the influence directly in President Trump's inner circle. And it's important to note, I'll get to some pretty harsh criticisms of Qatar from President Trump. So his views aren't necessarily shared by those in his orbit. Take, for example, Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, who also went on a press tour of his own this March to offer glowing praise of the Qataris.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that everybody may want something. I think in the case of the Qataris, they're criticized for not being well motivated. It's preposterous. They are well motivated. They're good, decent people. What they want is a mediation that's effective. And Sheikh Mohammed, the Prime Minister of Qatar, is a good man. He's really
certainly is.
He's a special guy. He really is.
I
And
agree.
he cares. And I've spent a lot of time with him and broken bread with him. And he's just a good, decent human being who wants what's best for his people. But also, like what you were alluding to before, he's able to put himself in the shoes of the Israelis, of the United States, and I think explain to the Qataris, explain to Hamas where they're going to have to get to make a deal.
In completely unrelated news, 2023, Witkoff sold his Manhattan Park Lane Hotel to the Qatari Investment Authority for $623 million. I'd like them too. I'd think they're pretty cool. Another man in President Trump's orbit benefiting from Qatar in a major way is President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. According to those familiar with the deal, a Qatari investor put roughly $200 million into Kushner's firm, Affinity Partners. And in 2017, the Kushners received loans for Qatari-linked firms to refinance a building in Chicago. In 2018, the Kushners negotiated a bailout fund from Brookfield Asset Management, whose real estate arm is partially owned by the Qatar Investment Authority. Now, this isn't hyperbole. Qatar has a long and well-documented history of supporting terrorism, and they were forcefully condemned for as much by President Trump in 2017.
The nation of Qatar, unfortunately, has historically been a funder of terrorism at a very high level.
That same year, 4 Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt, and the UAE, launched a blockade on Qatar, accusing them of supporting terrorism and being too close to Iran. Trump seemed to support that move, writing on X, back then it was Twitter, "During my recent trip to the Middle East, I stated that there can no longer be funding of radical ideology. Leaders pointed to Qatar. Look, Exclamation point. So, it should come as no surprise that Qatar even provides safe haven to groups like the Taliban and the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood, for those who don't know, founded in 1928 and seeks to unite the entire Muslim world under an Islamist government. Nearly every major fundamentalist Sunni Islam group can trace their roots to the Muslim Brotherhood, including, but not limited to, but including Hamas, to whom the Qatari government provided $1.8 billion between 2018 and 2023 alone. To this day, the Muslim Brotherhood is thick as thieves with the Qatari royal family, while their mouthpiece, Al Jazeera, publicly pushes Muslim Brotherhood propaganda. The end goal here is interesting because Qatar is sort of a country or a group of people you've likely glossed over. And that's by design. Qatar's strategy is clearly one of multifaceted influence by investing heavily in American institutions like universities, think tanks, by funding media outlets like Al Jazeera, and cultivating relationships with influential figures. Qatar aims to shape public perception and, most importantly, policy in its favor. The influence allows Qatar to protect its interests, to secure its position on the world stage, to maintain and grow their wealth, to continue to accrue power beyond its small size. And if you were to hear their safe-harbored pals, Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, tell it, potentially advance a radical Islamist agenda. In a nutshell, Qatar wants to leverage its unique relationship with the United States to help establish a global caliphate. So let's sum up the pros and cons of our relationship with Qatar. Picture a whiteboard here. Pros: a strategic military base. Al Udeid Air Base is pretty critical for American military operations in the Middle East, involving logistical supports, a strategic foothold. That's important. Economic ties. Qatar is a significant importer of U.S. goods and a source of foreign direct investment, contributing to the American economy. Their mediation role. Qatar has played a role in mediating some conflicts in the Middle East, potentially contributing, if temporarily, to regional stability. Let's look at the cons. Emphatic support for terrorism. Kind of a big one. Qatar's alleged support for terrorist groups like Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, raises some significant concerns about their association with the United States. Undue influence. Their substantial investments, again, in U.S. universities, think tanks, and media raise questions about their influence on our policy and on public opinion. Maybe an opinion that you held before this today and didn't even know why. Human rights abuses. Qatar's human rights, their track record, is awful. Not just involving women. Slave labor. Modern indentured servitude, not to mention their clash, fundamentally, with American values. So, what should the United States do? Well, my proposal: Qatar needs to address these very glaring issues: the terrorism, the human rights abuses, the undue influence, the subverting our institutions, or we end our alliance. Flat out. An alliance with the United States should be seen and treated as a privilege, a prize for the select few, not viewed as a weakness for our foes to exploit. Some steps that we need to take: maybe we should stop considering Qatar a major non-NATO U.S. ally and should instead designate it a state sponsor of terror. How about that? How about we move our base to a more favorable nation in the region, which I know is hard to do. How about we pull any federal funds or grants from universities that do business in Qatar? How about we cancel Qatar's ability to use the United States banking system before they potentially use it against us in a very big way? How about we force anyone in the U.S. doing business with Qatar to register with FARA? At least some transparency. How about those steps? Because most people in this country have no idea. And again, that's by design. If you doubt it, please peruse the references, links in the description. It is right now a new time, a new day in the United States in President Trump's second term. And I've talked about this quite a bit. It's not time to continue with the status quo. Right now is a time to take inventory. And that includes taking inventory and maybe conducting an audit, if you will, of all of our relationships, our alliances, our arrangements with Qatar and with every other country on earth. Good starting point, I would say, is recognizing that any country trying to play both sides globally is not on ours. And when it comes to selecting our draft picks, the ones to be on our side, I'm generally anti-caliphate. Oh, you're still here? And you're still watching this on YouTube? You've probably noticed something is missing by now. I'm not here. That's because the live daily show is now streaming exclusively on Rumble weekdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. Tune in there, where nothing is censored.